Hello, welcome to ProAmp Solutions. So I wanted to do a video on an amp design I've been working on for a while, and I've refined a few times and getting ready to go in production with this. So this is inspired really just by my own desire to do a completely new original design based on my design experience. And I've actually taken this amp on the road a little bit and had several musicians try it out to really good feedback. And the point I'm at right now is initially I was using a GZ30. Well, I started out with a 5Y3, and then I changed to a GZ34, and now I'm doing just silicon diode rectification with some Schottky diodes, low voltage drop, to see if I could generate really a little more plate voltage than I was getting. So this particular output transformer here, let me be careful here, give me a second, let me unplug and I'll turn this over and show you the transformers that this amp has in it. This has a Mojo 760EX transformer in it, and it has a Mojo 771 output transformer in it, which is really nice, and it's got a 4 and 8 ohm output. And you know, my vision for that was I've got an external connection. Let me show you my back panel. So this is the back panel for the amp. So I'm going to have an external jack readily available if we want to run a different speaker. So this switch here, it's a little bit obnoxiously large, but in is 8 ohms on the speaker, and I'm currently running this in a cabinet with a 10-inch Celestion Gold speaker. And if you come back, that's 4 ohms, so you could run an external 8 ohm and the internal speaker together, or you could run just an external speaker by unplugging this at either 4 or 8 ohms depending on what the cabinet is. So that gives a little bit of versatility. And then basically I've got a highly customized tone stack that is designed to minimize the loss in the circuit that a normal tone stack might bring, and to make it super functional, and to really make it work just really smoothly up and down and what it does. And I can show you in my design modeling what that looks like. But today I just wanted to give you an overview and where I'm at. I'll show you the face panel. So this is the face panel. I'm calling this the Riffer, and it has a gain control, a tone control, and a master control. And if you pull out on the tone control, it increases the gain. And this is a lot in a fairly small package, and where I'm headed is removing the tube rectifier and seeing what happens to my voltage drops as I go across, where I end up with my plate voltage on the preamp tube, and really just some other design characteristics. Basically, I'm experimenting with how much compression I get when I reduce the screen voltage, which is a neat little trick, rather than having it just maybe a volt or lower than the plate. If you drop it about 10 volts, you get some really interesting compression. So I believe where I'm going to end up in this amp is putting a 1K screen resistor on it, and then ahead of that on my voltage drop as I come down from the reservoir cap to the screen cap, I'm looking at about a 10 volt drop. Right now I'm running a 680 ohm cathode resistor, and I'm at about 85 to 90% dissipation. I've tried a couple of different tubes. And there is, and one of the things I can show, I'm planning on doing maybe some live videos where I can show some characteristics. You know, a lot of folks believe, you know, you just stick a tube in it and they all sound similar. That is not true at all. So this here is a Sylvania that I paid, I think, about 60 bucks for. This is a legitimate vintage Jan made in America 6V6 GT. And what I've done is I've compared this to the Ruby tubes. And you can see a difference in the signal shape on the scope. And you can see, while it's not significant, or I would call material, you can see as you dime the amp, a little bit different plate voltage drop, a little bit different current draw, and that manifests itself in a little bit different waveform on the scope. So as I go into this a little bit more, basically I'm working on my last refinements and some of the shortcomings of my layout as I originally designed. While it might look nice and neat and tidy to you and well done with the handmade turret board, there's some things I want to do a little bit differently. And then I decided to go with a newer modern style power button. You push the power button and it will illuminate and show you that the amp is on. Not sure how well you can see that illumination with the light, but it is illuminated. And then you know, I just wanted a really clean, highly functional amp. And the beauty of this amp, the feedback that I'm getting, is it's very pedal friendly. And the goal of this amp is to be basically a practice amp that you can be a good neighbor with. In other words, bedroom volume and outstanding either clean tone or very fat, mildly distorted blues type tone at bedroom volumes. And I believe I've accomplished that based on the feedback that I've gotten. You can get just outstanding tone on this at a very low volume. I tried experimenting. What this is right here is I added actually a cold clipper that's fully bypassed on the second gain stage. I thought it would make the amp maybe a little more versatile if I could have a switch and turn that on or off. But a little bit to my surprise, you know, intuitively you might think, oh wow, that's going to make a big difference and you'll get JCM 800 tones out of it. Not true at all. There are limitations because we have only one preamp tube, of course. And with the clean drive that I have, to exceed the voltage threshold to cause clipping in the second gain stage, the cold clipper actually makes very little difference. In other words, it's not enough difference to implement and use all over the switch that I already had implemented. So that was, to be candid, a little bit of a surprise to me. I thought it would make more impact than it did. But nonetheless, the good news is on this particular amp design, while that I would consider my own personal theory sort of debunked in reality, looking at it on the scope. Basically on the scope, if I short this out right here, and as I do more videos, I'll show maybe picture-in-picture the scope. I'm got to get a second camera and a gimbal and some help to do that with. But that's where I'm headed, to be able to show sort of design in practice. I'm not about, you know, I'll build anybody a custom amp, hand wired to, you know, an old schematic, but that's really not who I am as a designer. I don't want to regurgitate history. I want to apply science and the things that I've learned over 20 years of doing this and make something original that has some additional benefits. So there are two things that I wanted to try on this amp. One is I'm going to put a high performance differential op amp based XLR output on it, so that you could send this to a soundboard in like a live environment. So say take a church environment where it's a smaller venue, they don't want a large tube amp with a lot of wattage. You can use this as your monitor, so to speak, and with a high quality XLR output, I'm hoping we could be able to send a signal to a sound source with a really high quality output. So that's one thing we're headed on, that you can join me on the journey. I have that designed in my Spice emulator, and it's working flawlessly, and I have it tuned to the output that I'm expecting from this amp and that I see in RMS voltage on the scope. But as I do it in reality, of course, you know, we have to test it, and I'll run it through my Yamaha mixer, and we'll get to experience that together. So basically the three, at this point, I have all of the design changes I want to implement documented, and I have them in my Spice model, and I'm going to retool and basically sort of rebuild this one final time from the ground up with 3 additions. I'm going to do the XLR out, and I think what I'm thinking for that is on this back panel here, which, you know, goes approximately in this position. I'm thinking, you know, I'll put a XLR out that's easy to access, and maybe with some sort of cable. So if I have to take the back, right now if I have to take the back panel off, I've got this quarter-inch jack, so it unplugs for convenience if there's any maintenance or disassembly. But nonetheless, and then my Celestian Gold currently fits in the cabinet with the cap off. I had to remove the, I forgot what you call it. My name escapes me right now. But anyways, I removed that and got it to fit. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to move the power tube over here, and I'm going to put that cover back on my Celestian Gold, and that will allow it to, you know, to fit in here with the arc that comes in under the amp. I'm going to move this switch to the side because I've got, I don't know, maybe 1.5 to 2 inches of clearance on each side of this in the cabinet. So I'm going to move that switch over here, make some more room for the Celestian Gold, and I'm going to move the power tube over here, and then working toward that really nice differential XLR output that you can use balanced or unbalanced. And then I'm going to change right now. I'll show you on this side. So I have a variable feedback switch. So this is a 3-way switch. So in the middle is what I would consider a normal-ish feedback, and then you can half that or double it with the 3-way switch. What I've decided to do is basically where I have low feedback, I'm going to put a floor on it and then use a potentiometer so that you can continually vary it and maybe dial it into your personal preference or sweet spot, so to speak. So from where I am right now, I'm going to do the differential XLR output. I'm going to just modify the negative feedback control to make it variable. Basically, it won't change the functionality, it'll just add more versatility to it. I'll put the floor where it is now, and with the pot, it'll end up basically where this is at double, but it'll give you everything in between. And then the last thing, which is like an uber bonus on this amp with only one tube, I've experimented. I had an amp, and I've had a few amps actually in the shop with foldback reverbs on them. And as you know, this is a very old methodology. The old Champ 12 used it. Ampeg Twin Echo used it. There's a bunch of amps out there that used it back in the day. Well, what I wanted to see is, can I achieve a high quality spring reverb on this amp without adding a tube? And I believe the short answer to that is yes. So I've designed a circuit to use the 4 ohm output of this to drive a 10 ohm input reverb tank, and then on the return stage, I think there's some weaknesses just because of where the technology is, how people could model back in the day when foldbacks were used for the reason that they were used. But what I'm trying to do here is be a minimalist in one sense, but make a very high quality sound. So the main issue with foldback reverbs isn't their tone, so to speak. While there are some limitations, they can sound shrilly. What I do like about them is they can almost have sort of like a vibrato sort of flair to them, which I think is really interesting and differentiating. But they tend to oscillate. So I had an amp in here, gosh, it was just a couple of weeks ago, and it had a foldback reverb on it, and it was a boutique amp. It was I think it was a Serotone amp. Anyhow, the owner complained that the reverb wasn't working and was highly intermittent. So I put it on the scope, watched it on the scope, and literally I could see it going in and out of oscillation. And in this particular case, I'll tell you how sensitive they are. That particular combo amp so it had 2 speaker output jacks. On the first one, this particular amp was a head, and when they did a combo implementation like this amp, they put a jack on the bottom side of the chassis that was just in parallel with the first jack position, and then they had a second jack position on the back panel that was in parallel with it. So all 3 of them were in parallel. Well, by accident, actually, what I noticed, I'm looking at the scope and I'm trying to diagnose and figure out how I can solve this oscillation, and I happened to unplug the first main speaker location on the back panel, and I moved it to the second one, and the oscillation just stopped, just like flicking a switch. And I'm like, what is going on? I moved it to the first, oscillate. Moved it to the second one, stop. Move it to the first one, oscillate. Move it to the second one, stop. And I'm like, what could possibly be, how? Just makes no sense. It's all together in parallel. Well, if you think about it in parallel, this here with the hot lead connection has basically you've got this jack coming up. Now in here I used a stereo jack to make the connection real solid, and I'm using what would normally be the stereo side as my ground connection just to make a real solid connection. But the idea is in this amp it just had the tip, and the tip was just flying. So I believe what was happening is that just that flying lead was acting sort of like an antenna and causing that oscillation. Just moving it 1.5 inches away stopped it. Moving it right next to it, it would oscillate. So I disconnected the hot lead from the jack on the bottom of the chassis, which would never be used in this head because that was designed for the combo, and it cleared right up. Just solved the problem. Really, really interesting. Anyways, nonetheless, I'm going to try driving the foldback reverb, and one of the things that you have to be concerned about is inducing any load. If you're using the 4 ohm tap, you don't want to induce extra load on the amp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bypass a 470 ohm capacitor into and then go in through a 10 ohm resistor. I'll show you the schematic, but that will be my send side. And then on the return side, I'm going to use an LND 150 return stage with the filtration and the features that I have come up with in my Blues Junior mods, and that will be the return stage, and I'm going to bring that in right to the second gain stage at the grid, and I'm just going to experiment with it outside the amp. We'll just we'll put the spring verb just on the workbench here, and I'll put those circuits, you know, It may be a little bit noisy, but I'll put those circuits so that we can test it, see what it sounds like. But the idea is that even with this, with just the 2-tube, everything in the audio channel analog, then I'm thinking we can drive the tank from the 4 ohm and then return that using the LND 150 as the return gain stage. So I'll sort of bust that out. We can even look at the LND 150 and how it performs. You can create tremolos with LND 150s without the added heater and all the things required for a vacuum tube. But nonetheless, that's where I'm headed with this amp, and we're looking forward to walking through that for you all that are interested in eye candy and the design and what the logic is behind it. And then we'll start introducing imagery with the scope so you can see it under certain conditions and how that changes, and even what difference tubes make. Again, you can tube roll and actually voice an amp considerably with just the tubes. So I know that from experience and from working with a lot of discriminating musicians. I had a popular musician in the shop, I don't know, this is a couple of years ago, and I said, hey, he wasn't quite happy with the sound. He had an orange OR 100 amp, and I did some work on it for him on the tone stack, and he just wasn't quite there. You know how we all are in pursuit of, our tone. And I said, hey, take an hour and a half, come to the shop, and we'll open your amp up, and we'll tube roll it one at a time, and I'll have 4 or 5 different tubes, different manufacturers, short plate, medium plate, long plate, and we'll put them in, and we'll A/B. And we'll start at the first gain stage, better, worse, better, worse, better, worse. Then we'll go to the second gain stage, third gain stage, and then the phase inverter. By the time we were done, he was astounded at how we were able to voice the amp. So it takes time, it takes patience, it's an investment, but it can certainly be done. I am fairly convinced where I'm going to end up on this amp. So talking about tubes, and this is going to end up being number 1 of the Riffer in my personal amp, unless somebody offers me enough for it to make it a no-brainer. But I've decided I'm going to use this Jan 6V6 GT NOS power tube, and then I'm going to use Tube Amp Doctor 7025 high grade premium preamp tube in this one. I think that's where I'm going to land. But I look forward to doing this, and sort of these last 3 things I think are going to be sort of intriguing. One is how well does this XLR output work, and if it works really well, I'll put a circuit board together and make it a mod that can basically work on any amp. Now this is a low output amp, so I had to design it to basically, this puts out about 6.6 volts, roughly 6.8 volts RMS, peak to peak, not peak to peak, RMS about 6.8 volts. So if I want a 1 or 1.1 volt max XLR output, I've tuned my current circuit in Spice for that. But if you have an amp that'll do 20, 30, 40, 50 or 100 watts, we can design that or just make resistor value changes for that differential amplifier. And I think that might be a valuable amp add-on that is a fairly easy circuit to assemble, and might be a valuable kit for you out there. So, give me your feedback and let me know if that's something of interest to you. Then I'm going to see if the variable feedback really is any more valuable than the 3 settings. In other words, if I dialed this into one particular spot, how different really would it be than one of the 3 switch settings? Is there any fruit there, or is it just something that's kind of a nah, don't need to do it? And then, of course, lastly, that foldback reverb. I just want to try it, and I'm really interested in more thoughtful design, particularly on the return and how that manifests itself in how that sounds. So stay tuned. This I'm going to call episode 1, and then we'll move on as I move through those phases. And I'm also planning on doing some live video on Saturdays. I'll give you plenty of notice for any design questions you have or troubleshooting questions you have with amps. But anyways, this is my amp design. I call it the Riffer, and I am planning on going into build production with this. Again, the goals of this particular design is to be a good neighbor, bedroom volume, great tone. This isn't an amp for a shredder, but anywhere from clean, jazz, fat blues, and mild rock distortion you can get out of this at any volume. And with a really efficient speaker like the Celestion Gold, you would be surprised how loud this is at 5 watts. It'll blow you out of a small room. So I just think it's extraordinarily versatile. It's a small, lightweight package with authentic tube tone that you can feel when you play the amp. That's one of my criticisms of solid state amps, and many the musicians I work with and for, they just, to the player, they feel sterile, even if they sound really good with all of the new DSP modeling out there. To a player who wants to express themselves and sort of feel the amp push back against them, you just, there is no substitute for a tube amp. So onward and upward, I look forward to this journey, and upping my video game with maybe some picture-in-picture as we move forward and getting into the production. So I'm basically at a point where I'm going to change what I do in the shop and transition really to custom builds and modifications for amps. I think a lot of what's out there right now, in my opinion, actually could be better, and a lot of what's out there is overpriced for what you get. And you know, I just simply don't care. I'm going to provide the highest quality components. It's not about nickel and diming. When I go into production, the cost is what the cost is. I'm not going to compromise on components. That's just the way I roll. So take it or leave it. But anyhow, a little bit of transition in the shop, moving towards custom amp builds and my own production run. I actually have 5 amps in mind, and they're all in different different stages of design. I have 3 of them basically perfected. This is the one I want to finish perfecting, and then I think I'll have an initial offering of those 3 amps with 2 more to follow. One is a completely new ground up design. It is a single-ended 6L6 amp, and that will be my 4th amp, but that one is so radically new, I think I'm going to just go through that start to finish. I have it obviously in Spice right now, but it's only modeled in Spice. It doesn't exist in reality, but I'm acquiring all the chassis and components and things for that. So things to look forward to. So anyways, thank you for watching my channel here at Pro Amp Solutions, and I look forward to sharing this with you. Join me on the journey.